Okay. Okay. Are you ready? Yep.
Power button, light turn screen, you're muted on the screen, easy peasy.
Green?
Yep.
Green is go?
Green is go.
Don't forget. Okay. Gene and I and the rest of the Running Brigade would like to thank all of you for coming, especially our President of the Senate, Ty Masterson, and House Speaker Dan Hawkins. And there'll be no outburst, please.
We can talk after. We're over.
If you'll all stand now for the flag salute, and then we'll have Pastor Farber lead us in prayer afterwards. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray so we can get started. Heavenly Father, we sure do love you. God, it's a beautiful day that you've given to us during this month of Thanksgiving. May we always remember how thankful we are to live in a free country. God, thank you for our land. Thank you for our leaders. Thank you for our representatives. I ask your blessing upon everything that takes place here tonight. Give us safety. Give us wisdom. Give us discernment. And God, help us to know exactly what you would have us to know tonight. May we honor you, God, with everything. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Okay, as you came in, you were all given index cards. And after the speaker and president get done with their little talk, we'll pick up cards in a basket, and Pastor Farber will read the questions to the guests, and if there's any duplicates on the cards, he won't read the duplicate. And we'll try to get as many answered as we possibly can before the night's evening. Also, I would like for everybody to respect everybody. There will be no outbursts, and if we continue to have outbursts, we'll be escorted out of the room. So, and I want to also recognize some of our representatives and senators that are here. We have Clark Sanders from Salina, and Stephen Howe would have been here, but he had another engagement with his son at the school. And we also have our newly appointed representative from Dickinson County, Greg Wilson. And our newly appointed senator for Dickinson and Saline County, Scott Hill. We'll be passing, while the speakers are speaking, we'll be passing a donation basket around to help pay for the room rent and our security people. And then we'll pass out the baskets after they're done talking. And there are two tables in the back room. One of them is our new human and sex trafficking task force that we set up. Linda will be there with information back there for human trafficking and sex trafficking, and they'll be able to answer any questions you might have. And also, our Dickinson County Women's Organization has brought some Charlie Kirk Freedom t-shirts that they are selling. If you want to.
Ew!
I ask that there's no outburst, please.
Let's keep going. Let's let these guys speak. We're done with the stuff.
And after the meeting,
Stop.
after the meeting is over, any of those that are able, after the meeting is over, any of those that can do, willing and able, I would like for you to pick up your chairs and stack them in the back room, no higher than 7 height. So, with that all being said, we'll let our guests take over.
Sounds like this one might be fun.
It's always a pleasure, Ty. So I want to introduce Ty Masterson, the Senate President of the Kansas Senate. He's been actually the Senate president for.
Turn your mic on.
There we go. He's been the Senate president now for, I believe this is his 6th year as Senate president. Certainly been in the Senate for a long time. Before that, he was House trained. He came from the House of Representatives. And I think you were only there 2 years, weren't you? Or 4? Three.
Yeah, precinct elected to fill back out, so 3.5.
That's a little bit off there. And then he went to the Senate. He's been there ever since. So I got to tell you, from my standpoint of being the Speaker of the House, having Ty on the Senate side has been absolutely a godsend. He's literally been a great partner to work with in getting the work of the legislature done. And I can't say enough about him. He is running for governor. And I personally think that he's probably going to float to the top and probably be one of our main candidates when we get to the primary, get through the primary. So please welcome Senate President Ty Masterson.
We decided to introduce each other, so I want to introduce you to, we're frickin' frack. We're not sure which one is which. I might be frick because some of these people say, "What the frick is he doing here?" So, well, I want to introduce actually Dan. So I've actually been in the legislature a little longer than Dan, but Dan, I could see him rising, breath of fresh air. When he became the speaker, it changed the dynamics between the House and the Senate because and by the way, not that any of the priors were necessarily bad people. It's just there's this dynamic in the Capitol where it's just kind of human nature. You're two different teams, kind of like instead we're all, you're Republican majority, but the House and the Senate, you make jokes about each other, right? And it had gotten to a point where the jokes were so bad it was kind of real animosity, and then it causes trouble in how you function. Dan shows up, and I supported Dan as the speaker to come in, met with him before he was ever speaker, and I was like, hey, I would like to have a very different relationship between that president and the speaker. And when he showed up, we've been on the same page. We've been able to do things I never thought we'd be able to do in the legislature, just because being able to, it all flows down, right? Because we get along, and we encourage our chairman to get along, and the membership to get along. People tend to get along a little more, and that was even with some rough people.
That's right.
We had some very.
You had a tough time there for a while.
It was a really tough time. I was like, we couldn't get through a caucus without a knockdown, drag out argument, and these 3 running off to the governor, and these 4 running off to the press, and we're all, anyway, it's a mess. But this guy, so we showed up, we've been able to do some things that had not been done, I'm not sure in our lifetimes. Like, our Constitution says 90-day session. It's supposed to be 90 days. The entire time, it's not been 90 days, hadn't been that way for decades. Nobody I could even find, even in the revisers, people that worked there 50 years couldn't remember it. We said, we're going to do that. We're going to get this in 90 days. We're going to take back over the budgeting process because the constitutional responsibility of the legislature is the budget. And we had conceded that basically to the governor. And so we'd sit there on pins and needles first 2 weeks of session waiting for the governor to propose a budget, and then you have just a matter of weeks to digest it and adjust it and move forward, and that ends up being your budget. So he comes in, so we have a legislative budget now. We did 90 days last session for the first time in forever.
And they said we couldn't do it.
And we did 89 actually, said it could be done. And last session was the hardest one to do it because it's the beginning of what we call a biennium. No bills are in the process. You have a brand new Senate, you have a brand new House. And so it's like the hardest time to actually get it done in that time frame. But what you learn is when people have deadlines, they meet them. We've just gotten so used to running along. So anyway, that Dan's been a breath of fresh air. I also like we deal with so many subject matters up there. You tend to look for people that are experts in that subject matter to help inform you. That's also why you have committees and hearings. So like Dan's an insurance guy. So when it was insurance related, I went to Dan, Medicaid expansion, those kind of subjects, we talked to Dan. And I was able to learn as we move forward. So anyway, he's been a great breath of fresh air in the Kansas legislature. So Speaker Dan Hawkins.
So, thank you. So to just kind of roll in where Ty left off. By the way, Ty and I do this show all over the state of Kansas. In 23, I don't know how many stops we made across Kansas. But we enjoy doing these things together because if one of us forgets something, the other was going to remember, and we kind of fill in the gaps. So it works out very, very well. He just talked about the budget, just briefly. So going back to 2023, One of the biggest things I've ever heard from our members, the appropriators, the people who are actually appropriating the money, is they never have enough time for the budget. Never. And so Ty and I, right after session in 23, we went to the governor and said, Governor, could you give us the budget sooner so our people could have longer to work on it? Can you imagine working on a $12 billion budget and getting it done in 6 weeks, in 6 weeks' time? And the budget committees may have, each budget committee may have as many as 12 budgets. For instance, the social services budget has a $4 billion state general fund budget, and they get a week to do it in. What do you do in a week? You don't do anything in a week. All you do is rubber stamp what you've got, because there's no time to really dive into that. And so we went to her, said, could you give it to us? And she said exactly what Ty and I thought she was going to say, no. And my question was, why? I already knew why. Why is because she wanted to be, and it didn't make any difference whether it's a Democrat governor or a Republican governor. I'm not picking on Governor Kelly in this. It's a governor thing. They want to be able to go to the people on State of the State and tell them what their priorities are. And then we get a budget report, not the budget, but a budget report the day after that, and we don't actually get the budget for another 3 weeks. So when we say we've got 6 weeks to work on it, we don't. We got 3 weeks. And then we've got to get it out, get it into conference, and get it done before the end of session. So it's impossible. She said no. And she really didn't help us out on that. And so in 24, Ty and I got together and said, we're going to do it this year. Well, then we got into session, we found out that we had to have certain things in place in our joint rules to be able to make it happen. So we couldn't do it in 24. So this year, in 2025, was the first year since 1957 that the legislature has done a budget on its own. And we say 1957, that's where the records changed. It used to be the legislature did the budget. We don't know what happened in 1957, but in 57, it kind of shifted to the governor at that time, and ever since then, the governor's done the budget. You realize when you do the budget, when we do the budget, then our people own it, and they do a better job. And in this last year, we trimmed our budget $210 million over the year before. And why is that very important? Because right now, as we speak, we're spending $600 million more than what we bring in revenue. And you say, wow, you're not bringing enough revenue. We're bringing in plenty of revenue. We're spending too much, and we have for a long time. And we're changing it right now. So the next 3 years, we have to continue exactly what we have done and continue to trim by about $200 million a year, and then our budget is going to be in good shape. And Ty said, you go to the guy who is the expert in it. Well, for me, in the budget, Ty was my expert. Ty came from the budget. Ty ran the Ways and Means Committee in the Senate for many, many years, and I can ask him virtually any question about the budget, and he can give me an answer. So for me, that partnership has been amazing. It's been absolutely awesome.
So part of the issue we're having with the budget, which I explained this to my son this way, because we had, when COVID hit, we had all that stimulus money pile in, right, which drove inflation way up, and you had all that money. I mean, it was, Laura Kelly's first proposal for a budget to us pre-COVID was proposing to refinance teacher retirement, our CAPERS accounts, to spend more money on operations. I mean, that's like refinancing your house to pay your power bill. Not a good idea. But what happened in COVID hits, and we literally got handed billions of printed dollars, both directly through the stimulus and then through all the PPP programs that went back through business. I mean, literally, we became awash in cash. But it was part of the problem because it was driving all this massive inflation, right? And so when people tell you, well, we don't have inflation anymore, that's like saying, well, my house isn't on fire anymore. Well, but it's burned. I'm not sure I can live in it, right? So it's not on fire. That's kind of where we're at. And it says to my son, we're headed into a very difficult time from a budget standpoint because it's like, son, you're used to living on $75,000 a year. Well, for the next 5 years, I'm going to give you an extra 75. Not real hard to balance your budget, pay down a little debt, maybe go on a vacation, right, make some investment. That's basically where the state's been with all that COVID money. Well, we're about to jump into year 6. All that money's gone. And so we have to, and we did put some money back for the rainy day, and we did pay down debt, and we did, but that inflation, our cost of the executive branch is up 60% in those 5 years. That is an unsustainable number. And so, and massive growth in executive branch employment. This is why we have to get back a hold of the executive branch, quite frankly. And so it is she was very fortunate in that. But that's why we took the budget down 200. We've also cut taxes. So that's part of it. We cut taxes over that time period. The fiscal note for the 5 years is $2 billion. Right? We've lowered income tax. We took tax completely off Social Security, which was a huge, we shouldn't have. Thank you, because that's right. Social Security, we were one of 4 states still taxing it. We had to override a veto to do that. We had to override a veto to get the state out of property tax. And there's about 90 million the state assessed there. So we've done, so that's part of the revenue issue, right? You have revenue dropping, but we have to bring our spending down in conjunction over these next 3 years to make those ends match, to get ourselves into a healthy place. And so that's where we have to be. So that's that on budget. And we should probably talk about some of the other fun stuff we're getting into. So
Ty, we've the last few years, it's actually not only budget was important, but taxes. You mentioned people don't realize how big of a deal it is for us to cut the income tax, do away with the income tax on our seniors, on Social Security. You realize the fastest, the population of our state that leaves the state the fastest and the most is our senior citizens. And why? Because they can go to Florida, or Texas, or Tennessee, or Arizona, where there's no income tax. Why do you want to stay in Kansas if you're going to have income tax? And quite frankly, Kansas, when you look at the individual tax liability, we're in the top 6 or 7 in the nation. Literally the top 6 or 7. And so what we've done on taxes is very important to our folks. Affordability issues is what we have literally concentrated on those last 2 years, is making sure that we do everything we can to make sure people can afford to live. You realize, and you do, you own a home.
Okay, well, I'll look at the whole way and see if you
should we let Clark finish his phone call?
Yeah, we'll let Clark finish it.
And property tax is a huge part of that affordability issue. That's the one thing that is so difficult for us to tackle, because that is entirely local spending, right? So you have your USD in your city, your county. Some of those counties have community colleges that have a heavy load on them. I'm down from Butler. We have a community college. So it is, that is the piece of affordability. That's the one tax that is disconnected when you get up into the state legislature of who really controls property tax. And so what we're gonna have to do from our level is eventually get a property tax constitutional amendment on the ballot. Because what you're having happen now in the property tax world is you're basically taxing people on an unrealized gain. We had all that massive appreciation of housing, right? Well, that's not something, I have a neighbor across the street that literally told me, because I'm in an old neighborhood, so big lots, big trees, old houses, but we had new houses built, tornado come through, they started over, so that comparables. He was paying double in property tax alone than he paid in mortgage, interest, insurance, taxes combined when he paid his house off 20 years ago. And so here he's reacquired the double-sized mortgage. So that is something, property tax is something we're gonna have to get, and that takes a supermajority of both bodies, regardless of the governor, to get something on the ballot for the people. But ultimately, we've got to put something out there for you guys to decide on that limits that capacity.
So where I was going just a second ago was, your 2 biggest expenses on your home is insurance and property tax. Insurance didn't used to be as big of an expense as it is today. But what drives insurance costs is the such high appreciation of building a home. You realize building a home today is tough. It costs a lot of money. You're actually better off to buy an existing home than to build a new home. The building cost is so high. Ty used to be a builder, so he can tell you about building costs. So those are 2 of the biggest drivers in home ownership, and the one thing that's going to become a barrier ultimately to people being able to own homes is those two costs. And so we have to do everything we can.
I'm hoping
to
this
help
guy's
people.
gonna help us out when he becomes the
That's
insurance
right.
commissioner.
That's
And he's
right.
running for statewide insurance commissioner. I'm hoping he's gonna be able to help us out on the insurance side when that comes up.
You know, another thing that we have spent a lot of time doing is something that we don't talk about a lot, and that is, you know, Kansas, believe it or not, has a pretty big sex trafficking problem. We're in the I-35 corridor, and I-70 and 35 meet is not a good place to be when it comes to sex trafficking. Or maybe it's a great place if you're a sex trafficker, because you got an artery going east and west through the nation, you got an artery going north and south through the nation. And so Kansas is right in the center of the nation, and probably, I think we are probably in the second or third from a geographical region for sex trafficking. So our legislature certainly spent time on that. We do have a bill out there. It's actually in a conference committee. It's called Senate Bill 71, I think. Yeah, Senate Bill 71. It's in a conference committee. We didn't get all of our conference committees done before we left at the end of April, or in April when we finished session. We've got about 6 or 7 of those still sitting out there that we will work on immediately when we get back, and that's one of them that we're going to do. It's certainly one that was mentioned, Rosemary mentioned about sex trafficking, one of the, was it Dickinson County that?
No,
You guys have, okay. So that's a big issue, literally for our state. It's a big issue for both the House and the Senate, and we will get that done. It's just a matter of finishing it up.
Yeah, I mean, and that goes to, there's actually been impact on that just from shutting the border off.
Oh,
So
huge.
whatever you think of the president, I don't care where you're at on who you think is a person, shutting that border off changed the world. I mean, to give you one great example, our Bureau of Investigation, right? So our undercover guys as late as last November, so right as the elections were happening in 24, were able to buy 200,000 and 300,000 fentanyl pills at a time in an undercover buy. By May, they couldn't find 2,000 or 3,000. It's a 99% drop in availability. And that, if you don't think that has a major effect. Now it is, unfortunately, there's a demand out there and there's some rise in old school, you know, meth, cocaine, heroin, those type of things, but the fentanyl, and that is Russian roulette. I don't know why anybody would ever take it, right? It's such a danger of losing your life. But anyway, just shutting sex trafficking and drugs, just from the actions of the president, have changed dramatically in a very good way. I saw a 5-minute sign down there. You guys take care. So we want anything before we get up to
Just one
questions?
quick anecdote about the drug issue and certainly the border being closed. I had a meeting today with the Sheriff's Association. They just had the biggest haul they've ever had in fentanyl, meth, a whole bunch of stuff. It was out in western Kansas. They had a guy in jail, and the guy had been in jail for a while. And he had a storage facility that he had rented, but since he was in jail, he wasn't paying the bill. And I think it's after 3 months they don't pay, then they put it up for auction. Well, a person came in and bought that. And when they opened the door, they found out it was filled with drugs. And so I hope that guy didn't pay a whole lot for that storage facility, because he didn't get a dime out of it. It all went to law enforcement. They did away with it, but that guy had a whole storage unit just filled with drugs. Unbelievable. That was quite a story they were telling me today, Ty. That was amazing.
I heard that one. I'm thinking, when I've seen all these cards floating around, I actually think it would behoove us to jump 2 questions, because we can ramble all night long.
Oh, yeah.
Frankly.
We
So
can talk a lot.
I'd say we start with the questions and let's just take them as they come.
And he's ready to go.
If you have questions after they've picked them up, just hold your hands up and we'll come and get them.
We'll try to be brief on our answers so we can get through as many as we
Because
can.
with the size of that stack and her picking up more, I'm not sure we'll get as many as we can in the time allowed, right?
Sure. Let's go ahead and jump into it while they're taking up a few more. Speaker Hawkins, there are several of these cards that reference wanting to know your reasons for removing Representative Sanders and Representative Howe from their positions on the Higher Education Budget Committee due to them not signing on to the session that you.
Absolutely. Actually, I was planning on actually bringing that up first, but we had some other things that we wanted to get covered, so we thought, we'll just wait for the question, we'll get to it. So literally we had an opportunity to call a special session, and it was a very necessary special session. It started out on redistricting, and whether you agree on redistricting or you don't agree on redistricting, redistricting is going to be important to us, because quite frankly, this nation cannot continue the way it is if we don't continue to have the ability to hold the House and the Senate. And so redistricting is important. So you call a special session. There's only two ways to call a special session. The Constitution provides it. It's a procedural, it's a constitution procedure. Either the governor calls a special session, in this case, the governor won't call the special session, or the House and the Senate with 2/3 signers of a procedure petition signs a petition, we get 2/3, we call ourselves into special session. I had 10 folks who refused to sign. 6 of those were chairs and vice chairs. And that's your opinion. Yeah, it is, it's your opinion. But for us, a procedure is an important thing for us to hang together on. If we can't hang together, we die together. And quite frankly, hanging together when it comes to procedure is important, because we wouldn't get many of the things done that you all wanted to get done if we weren't able to do our procedural motions. And so our folks know, and you can ask Clark, he knew what was happening when he decided not to sign. He knew that he was going to lose his position on higher ed. So being a chair, being a vice chair is a privilege. It's not a right. It's truly a privilege to serve our caucus. And when the caucus is trying to get something done and you have a few people who stand in the way, then you remove them from those leadership positions. Because if you're not going to lead with the rest of us, then you probably shouldn't be in those positions. They all knew what the score was. Every one of them. I'm talking, thank you very much. All of them knew what I was going to do. Clark's even said it in his releases that he made to New York Times and CNN. He said, I knew what he was going to do. I knew the risk. I have to do what it takes to have people in the positions that are going to support the caucus. Do I dislike Clark? Absolutely not. I like Clark. I didn't even want to have to do it. But you have to do those things. If you aren't going to have folks stand together on a procedural motion, then they should not be in a leadership position. And I would do it again. I guarantee I would do it again.
It was wrong from the beginning.
So, also an opinion, right? I mean, so it's wrong to come in for a special session? Obviously, that's not true, right? I mean, so here's where I would support that. Having been the leader of a chamber, when you have a small minority of your caucus going against the bulk of the caucus on process, right? That is what I've learned over time. If you allow that to go completely unchecked, no consequence, that happens more and more often, then you lose the ability to have process. So it's not a personality conflict. It's having the system function, if you will. And those are by the way, my heart went out to Dan, because those are very hard decisions, because sometimes they're made to get with people that you care about personally. And I think in this case, that's one of those situations. I didn't have to deal with it in the Senate, because the Senate understood that we had more than a supermajority to come in, because there were other issues to deal with. This wasn't just a question on redistricting. We had the one big beautiful bill, $500 million in rural hospital dollars, the first $100 million dedicated, obligated by 12/31 of this year. And we weren't coming back into session. We weren't coming back into session until January. So you're literally handing the ability to waste that. And there was an opportunity there to have another $100 million. If you're in line with what the administration's trying to do, there's another opportunity for another $100 million that we're not going to get with the governor having control of that. So you basically, sorry, I'm a little country, I was gonna say pissed away, but I'm probably not right. I just said it anyway. So, the opportunity for that other 100 million, plus we lose control of that was one. And then you had our Supreme Court decide not to take up the appellate court's decision to allow people to change the sex marker on their birth certificate and their driver's license. See, so this is who we're talking about. Why can't I change the date? It's just as factual, right, of information that's on my birth certificate. So my point is, we had a reason to come in and fix those things. So there was all kinds of other reasons to come in. So special session ended up not being about just that. And something, well, it feels, thank you. They go, what feels like an excuse? Well, it doesn't matter what it feels like. It's not an excuse. We have some issues to take care of. So some of that's just kind of keeping peace amongst the members of the caucus.
And literally, signing on to a petition for a special session is not the vote for redistricting. I actually also told each one of them, I'm not telling you how to vote on the votes. I'm just asking you to sign a petition so we can come in and have the discussion. Your vote's still your vote. And Clark's shaking his head, because I've said that. Your vote's your vote. But coming in and allow the discussion to happen is the appropriate thing to do. And if we don't get that done, we're going to miss opportunities. I've had people say, well, you just manufactured 2 issues. Believe me, we had no idea when we started down that road that those 2 issues were even going to come at us. 1 week later, after our retreat, the week of his retreat is when we found out about Senate Bill 180. And Senate Bill 180 is one of those things that we have to come in for. 2 weeks later, we have the big beautiful bill information on this rural health transformation fund drop in our lap. We didn't know it was coming. We didn't even know what was in the big beautiful bill. We're not in DC. We don't follow all of the aspects of the big beautiful bill. But when it dropped in our lap, and it did, it dropped in our lap, I called Ty and I talked and said, we've got to add this to our special session. It's something we have to get done. They get their own votes on that. But on the procedure of coming into special session, everybody should have stayed together. And that really covers it. That covers that question.
Okay. There were so many questions about that, and I'm trying to put them all together. I'm going to piggyback this on that, and you can give an explanation. It says, in light of the financial difficulties that a lot of Kansans are facing, how can you justify the possibility of spending $400,000 on this special session? And this specifically says redistricting.
So the one thing that people don't realize is we saved $2 million because we were done in 89 days. Normally, we wouldn't get done until the middle of May, another 30 days after that. So actually $3 million. If we would have went the normal length that we usually go, that's $100,000 a day. That's what it costs us to be in session, is $100,000 a day. So we actually saved $3 million, and it was going to cost, and they saved $400,000. Actually, $400,000 was what was budgeted. We were only planning on being in 2 days, so it was $200,000. So we saved $2.8 million instead of $3 million.
And I would add to that, the $100 million issue of the rural hospital dollars. It could have been another $100 million, and so you're gonna $200,000 that we'd save $2 million on. It was a financial non-decision. It was actually going to benefit the people financially.
Again, this may be a little bit of a shotgun, so we're going to a different question here. Are you for or against ending early voting, and why?
Absolutely. As far as early voting, no, actually.
Distinction between in-person voting or mail-in.
Yeah.
I'm just reading the question the way it's written. This says in favor of ending early voting.
Yeah, so early voting is just a fact of life for Kansas. It really is.
I don't know. The way I would answer that is I'm for in-person early voting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's become a season, though. I think it's gone a little too far out, but I'm for in-person voting, because in-person voting, you have to show your ID, right? Or vote provisional, right? Which is that's the legitimacy of it. Mail is where I have trouble.
Right.
Mail is where we have trouble, because that is, and even though we try to canvass, I am not a fan of mail-in ballots. I think you used to have to justify an absentee mail-in ballot, and I'm okay with that. Because then otherwise, you should be coming in person, this is who I am, because we want to make it easy to vote, not easy to cheat.
And literally, the 3-day grace period goes along with that. In this session, we did away with the 3-day grace period. It's already in the courts. The courts, somebody sued, and it's already in the courts, and they'll decide that. But our election is a certain day. At the end of that day, we should know who the winner is. We shouldn't have to wait another 3 days to be able to decide who wins the election. So we'll see what the court does on that.
Speak.
Can I ask a very specific follow-up question?
Hold on a second. We're going to read these real quickly.
He said
This is for
it's
both
not
of you guys,
justified,
and it has to do with.
it's not justified.
Hold on just a second. Hold on. This has to do with the elections we were just talking about. We just recently had an election, and our turnout was awful. Absolutely awful. With voter apathy, what are some ideas, your ideas on how to keep voter enthusiasm strong or build some enthusiasm in voting?
So probably one of the best thing we can do when it comes in, and it happens every single off year. So in the odd year, that's when the local elections are, the school district and the city council races are all in the odd year, and the voter turnout is abysmal. Several years ago, we tried to change that to where all elections happen on an even year. So on either like this next year, the governor is on the top of the ballot. 4 or 2 years later, the president's on the top of the ballot. That's where we get our biggest turnout. We tried that. At that time, we did not get it passed through the House and the Senate. I personally believe it's time for us to try again. I think that we should look at going to all elections happen in even number of years. And if we do, the turnout will be huge.
So I simply agree with that. And it's just been proven over time and through history. Those years where you have either a governor or a president on the top, you just get more turnout. It was sad. In my area, I'm down in Butler, we barely 10% of registered voters showed up. And I think it was just this, I think Republicans think, well, everything's great because Trump's in the White House, so they don't show up. The Democrats are angry because Trump's in the White House, so they do show up. And so so you get everybody that showed up was on one side of the fence, and it was just how that works.
Thank you.
All right. We're gonna jump you to the front, I guess.
Thank you.
You bet.
Could you state
They
your
made me say please to get a piece of paper and pen, so.
Oh, well, I'm sorry
you know.
about that. I'm sorry.
Can you state your position on Second Amendment rights?
Yeah.
Is that what-
That wasn't heard.
Oh, okay.
That was
I was like, wow, that was a surprise. So,
I think I can answer for both of them. We're strong Second Amendment folks. Matter of fact, the majority of Kansans are Second Amendment folks. Probably one of those issues that probably polls the best across this state.
well, the right, and the right to defend myself, defend my freedom, the right to protect my family. I think it's an absolute fundamental right. And it's why, it's what sets America apart to a large degree, the ability to have self-defense. And I think it's just as important. I've 6 children, 4 daughters, and I want them to know how to protect themselves. Because, it's a biological fact that men are stronger and can do more damage, and I want them to be able to have an advantage themselves.
And it's actually not a partisan issue. You realize in the state house, we have the right to carry a firearm. We have since 2013, we've had that right. There are Democrats that carry in the state house, there are Republicans that carry in the state house. So it's not as big a partisan issue in Kansas as you might think. We've got both sides that carry.
This question goes back to the early voting, mail-in voting that you were talking about a moment ago. Are you against people who are homebound or in college or out of state participating in a mail-in voting?
No.
No, if you're a citizen of this state, that would be a justified reason, right, for the mail-in ballot, 100%. That'd be the justified reason. If I had one of my own kids registered at my house, off to college, and I think that's a justifiable reason to have a vote. And that's valid, absolutely. Yeah, if you're a citizen of Kansas, you should have that right.
What is being done to lower property taxes? I know you guys introed with that a little bit earlier. But especially this question is concerned with seniors on fixed income.
Yeah, so our Constitution does not allow us to distinguish between veterans, seniors, whoever. When our taxes are levied, they have to be levied against everybody. So I get emails, I'm sure Ty gets emails saying, you need to do away with property taxes for seniors, or freeze them at age 65 for seniors. We have disabled veterans that say, you need to do away with property taxes for disabled American veterans. And that may sound easy, but literally, from a constitutional standpoint, that's not something you can do. Doesn't mean you can't change the Constitution, but to change the Constitution, you have to have 2/3 agree in the House and 2/3 agree in the Senate. And as you can see, it doesn't always happen. So it's truly one of the things that Ty and I, actually back in '23, Ty and I did a tour across the state just on taxes. We had, I don't know, 10 or 12 stops across the state, and we talked about it every day that we were out. And we're still talking about it, because it's something you have to get an agreement both in the House and the Senate. The Senate has produced a constitutional amendment. It came to the House, it had a vote, and it got 38 votes. We have to have 84 votes. You know, we did some things, sent them to the Senate. They didn't get a good reception in the Senate. We have to come together on whatever we do, and right now, that's probably Ty and I's biggest challenge, is to get our folks together, talking and listening, and coming up with a solution that both sides can vote on. We both realize it takes both sides to get something done, not just the House doing something or the Senate doing something. Both have to do something.
So I would say there's 100%, right? Ultimately, it takes a constitutional amendment to do any of it. However, there are a few things I think would be beneficial even on top or beside that. In general, states that have elected appraisers have lower property taxes than those that don't, right? And so we don't. So there are things you can do along those lines. There's opportunities to audit local governments. And are they following the revenue neutral laws and things that are in place? There's some things we need to do to be on top of, local governments. Because one hard part, there's not a lot of light in those areas generally. So it'd be good to have those, but ultimately, Dan is correct. It's gonna take a constitutional amendment.
This question says, what are you doing to protect our rural hospitals and farmers' access to local health care?
So I'm going to jump right in there on that, because it goes back to that $100 million that's coming into the state. It's called the Rural Health Transformation Funds. $100 million that will be landing in the governor's lap for her to distribute by December 31. Ty and I agree. What we should do with that money, and what needs to be done, is to change rural health care. We have a new model. It's actually, we've got 3 hospitals that have changed over to what we call the Rural Emergency Hospital. You know, the day is gone when hospitals have people coming in and just staying there. Just go back to a short 65 years ago when I was born. When I was born, my mom was in the hospital probably for 3 days. Today, if you have a baby, you're in and you're out, sometimes within 12 to 18 hours, but no more than 24 hours, unless you have a C-section. Used to, you would go in and you would have a hip replacement, and you'd be in there for a week. Now you're lucky to be in there 2 days with the hip replacement. You used to, my dad, long gone, had a heart attack when he was about 48 years old, and this is a long time ago. He had a heart attack, went in for 4 bypasses. He was in there for a week and a half. Today, you're lucky to be in there 3 days, 4 days, and they already got you back home. And so healthcare is being delivered different than what it has been in the past. And all of our system was built on the past, and it's just not the same. And so for in the rural areas, what we truly have to do is to move them from the current hospital situation to a more rural emergency hospital, where it's basically an emergency room, a clinic with a doctor, and a couple of beds, not a 25-bed hospital anymore. You realize we have 25-bed hospitals out there that are being staffed that are lucky to get 2 bed nights a week. How do you do that? How do you stay in business when you don't have people in there every night? It's impossible. You're not getting the revenue. And so we have to change. That $100 million would have went a long way in us being able to change some of our hospitals over to that rural emergency hospital. That's truly what we got to do. We have to change.
I would add a little bit to kind of what we did last year. We increased the Medicaid reimbursement rates
We did.
internally, because that was kind of much better answer than just Medicaid expansion. Because that's usually when you get that question, it's somebody asking you, why didn't you expand Medicaid? Because they think that would save rural hospitals. You don't have to guess anymore. I mean, Medicaid's been expanded in 40 states for for more than a decade. So you don't have to guess anymore. It has not been saving rural hospitals. Matter of fact, the rural hospital closure rate is slightly higher in expanded states than non-expanded states. And the bigger problem, in my perspective, is the fact that it is displacing the disabled and the frail and elderly, low-income mothers and children, because that's just a math problem. You're taking tens of thousands of more individuals, able-bodied adults without dependents, sticking them into a fixed provider world of how many docs take Medicaid, and it's by nature is going to displace. And so you're getting slightly worse health outcomes on the disabled. And from my perspective, that's what that program was meant for. The disabled, the frail and elderly, and that's why we didn't expand. But what we did do reimbursement rates. We increased it, and that's been helpful. That's been successful in our hospitals. But Dan is absolutely right. There has to be a paradigm shift in how the healthcare is delivered.
We also raised the hospital tax, the hospital provider tax. It was about 3.5%. We raised it to 6%. And if you talk to your hospitals, they will tell you that probably meant more to them than any Medicaid expansion could ever mean to them. That was truly a shot in the arm for them. It truly was.
What does that mean? I don't understand what that is.
There are, I don't know, a handful of questions on this. I believe it's SCR 1611, the direct election of the Supreme Court justices.
Yeah, that's one I'm very glad to talk about, because it's critical. And how many know you have a question on your 2026 ballot to elect your Supreme Court? All right, that's good. That's important. So and I'm about to demonstrate how important this is. How many of you guys know legislators don't count? How many of you know we just had a Supreme Court justice resign this summer and a new one's been appointed? Well, there's a couple. Legislators don't, spouses don't count either. But point being, don't feel bad if you don't know, because nobody knows how the system works and who's becoming our judges. And by the way, the gal who's just appointed might be a perfectly fine person. She has never been a judge, so has no judicial experience, and in her own words, has no judicial philosophy on how to interpret the Constitution.
Oh, great.
And this is now your seated Supreme Court justice. And the problem is why this is so important. By the way, as somebody invested in the governor's race, that question is more important than the governor's race. Because that puts you back in charge of all three branches of government. You're not now. That is a nominating commission controlled by 5 lawyers, elected by only lawyers. If you're a lawyer in here, congratulations, you're a super voter. But the rest of us have no say. Right? That is how important that is. That is probably the most critical thing in the 2026 ballot. And when I say this, our Supreme Court just does not reflect the values of the Kansas people on a host of things. You'll have the opponents say it's about this one thing or that one thing. It's not about one thing. It's about they don't reflect the Kansas people. And it needs to. You say who every legislator is, you say who the governor is, and you got zero say in the judicial branch of our government. And that's so key, because quite frankly, the legislative branch, okay, so we pass the laws, but you got an executive branch that implements and enforces, or not, the law. And then you got a judicial branch that interprets, and I'd say sometimes all out invents the law. And so it is so critical that we get control of all three branches of government. So please get out and use your sphere of influence to vote. Except for you two, don't use yours.
I would say ditto to everything Ty said. I would also say that if you don't think that our judicial branch is not political, you would be wrong. politics plays a part in the judicial branch. It does currently. In the
It's
Supreme
life,
Court.
it's in everything.
In the Supreme Court, absolutely.
The US Supreme Court.
Absolutely. So just to give you an idea, we talked a little bit ago about Senate Bill 180. Senate Bill 180, the district court ruled that it was constitutional. The appellate court ruled it was unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court punted. They did not take it up. Why would they punt on that when you've got two courts that disagree? Well, they punted because they didn't want to answer that question because they knew how they would answer it. And if they answered it the way they wanted to, it would put the emphasis on judicial selection. It would make the whole argument that we need judicial selection front and center. So by punting, they didn't have to answer that question.
Did we get that one?
I'm gonna
Hey,
let
come
you
on.
build on that a little bit. This question is in reference to that same topic, and to be clear, this is a Kansas Supreme Court.
Yes, we're talking about the Kansas Supreme Court.
It says, when you support that, why do you support turning the judicial branch into a political position?
So
Well,
that's the premise of the question is wrong. It's 100% wrong. The politics are in it right now. It's just in the back room, right? It's the 5 lawyers. That's where the politics are, right? Even if you go to the federal model, which I used to support mostly because I thought that's the only thing we could get out to the people, it's still then you have 40 senators where the politics are. It is the best model because, by the way, that is, to use the judicial vernacular, standing for an election is standing before a jury of your peers. It is making your case of why you should sit in the seat you're going to sit in. And that should exist in every branch. We have 22 states. It's the most common way, elect. We elected before 1958. It is the most common way. And when you actually look at it, they try to tell you that this nominating commission is about merit and taking the politics out. Politics are in it, and it's abundantly clear when you're in it and you see it. It is in those elected states where you actually see higher merit if you think of merit of time on the bench, judicial experience, display of decision making. Those are higher in the elected states. And that is why it's imperative. It is not, because the politics are there. That's what's missed in the premise of that question. It's not making it a political branch. It is a political branch. It's making it exposed to the people.
It's giving you the ability to vote. And that is the one thing that people want. People want the ability to vote. I've not seen anybody says, well, I don't want to vote for it. No, they want to vote. They absolutely want to vote.
You don't have to. Don't worry about it. We got this. Right.
The constitutional amendment question again, we had one of these several years ago, and it was voted down. I think it was the value of them both, if I remember that correctly.
It did.
And one of this question has to do with, there was so much misinformation. There was a lot of uneducated voters. So with this constitutional amendment, how do we educate the voters in concern to this idea?
Yeah, so you're absolutely correct. There was tons of misinformation on value them both. Quite frankly, the opponents of value them both outspent the proponents of value them both 7-1. They had a ton of money that they brought in to influence everybody to vote against that. You know, we're going to see the same thing again this time. You're going to see a ton of money. The trial lawyer, the American Bar Association has already said that they're going to bring in 20 to 30 million into the state of Kansas to convince people not to do this. I wonder why they would do that. It's not political? That's not political? Come on, that's political. It's a hugely political thing. Our side certainly is out there raising money right now to mount that campaign to show people why they should do this. So we'll see how it goes. Will we raise as much money as they'll bring in? Probably not. Quite frankly, those groups are really good at flooding the market with money and with misinformation. That's the reason why Ty and I get out here and talk about it.
So I don't think I'd add to it. There's two things I would add. This is gonna be different in one way because it's just a much more straightforward issue, right, of the electing. I mean, it's gonna be some variant of you'll have the right to elect your Supreme Court. But I mean, that's not, okay, it's either I'm gonna want it or I'm not. I mean, that's pretty simple, and it was pretty convoluted with valuing them both. And here's what I would even add to that, that encourages me anyway. The very same ballot that held valuing them both back then, and the political climate was rough, but you had another question on the ballot, a constitutional question. There was one that passed, and it was the right to elect your sheriff. People want the right to have a say. And I think it's gonna be abundantly clear. It's a lot simpler, plain language, a lot simpler issue. We will need to educate, but it won't be the mountain that you had back then with the confusion and that valuing them both timing happened to be on the ballot, put on the ballot before anybody knew what was gonna happen with Dobbs and, Roe v. Wade and all that. And so it was the very first thing up, and the money flowed in from everywhere.
This question is directed to Speaker Hawkins. If the bill mandating clergy to report abuse in the state of Kansas passes out of committee, will you commit to allowing it to come for a vote in the House?
I don't know why I wouldn't. I don't know about that bill. I've not heard about it. But if it comes out of committee and one thing we do, we always do what we call a whip count. Whip count is just finding out where the vote's at. And we know that on certain issues, we have to hit a 2/3 majority, 84, to be able to get it passed, because the governor will veto it. This would be an issue that the governor would veto. Guarantee you, she'll veto that one. If that's the case, and I've got to hit 84 and Ty's got to hit 27, we got to make sure that we're fairly close, that we've got 80 or 81 or 82 votes to be able to do that. So at that time, we'll have to look at it to see if it will come for a vote, because we don't tend to bring things up just to watch them die on the floor. If we don't have the votes to be able to get something done, we don't bring it up. But we have a whip team that goes around and does that for us every day of session.
This question very plainly says, is there any plan to expand property tax breaks specifically for disabled vets and seniors? And I think we've talked about that.
Yeah, we talked about that before.
So just skip that. HB 2063, the Nature Conservancy has $30 million in Working Lands Fund, $15 million in Wildlife Fund, $15 million Outdoor Fund, it's the slush fund. What is the current status of this is the question that it boils down to.
I don't have any, I've not heard of it. It could,
that bill number up.
it could be, it's in
Just
committee,
incoming.
so it's never come out of committee yet.
All right. What are your plans to lower healthcare costs in Kansas?
Probably, well, that's a big question, and quite frankly, I have a lot of answers for that. Even the Democrats today will admit that ACA was not a good thing.
What?
Yeah, sure. Sure, Jeffries, Minority Leader Jeffries, just last week on a program said, we know that it was not affordable. We know that it's not working. But we want Republicans to work with us to fix it. You can laugh if you want. Go and look at it. He said that. It's a fact. It's a fact. It is truly.
That's right.
It is truly a fact that the ACA has not worked very well, and it's very expensive. I've been in the health insurance arena now for 25 years. And before 2010, a 20-year-old could buy a health policy for about $150. A 30-year-old goes up a little bit more, close to $200. A family back then, before 2010, could buy a health plan for about $700. Today, a family pays $2,000 a month. You don't believe it?
Yeah, it's your fault.
They do.
Yeah, it's your fault.
It's my fault.
It's
Why
the
is that?
Republicans' fault.
Oh. Well, I gotta tell you, not a single Republican voted for the ACA, so you can say what you want to, but they didn't vote for the ACA. That was done on a reconciliation bill by the Democrats during the Obama administration. Believe me, I know all about that. That's my business. But truly today, insurance, especially health insurance, is almost unaffordable for most people. If you don't get it through your employer, it's tough to get. And quite frankly, the ACA, if you are a low-income person, you can actually get almost free insurance. If you're at just a little bit above 100% of the poverty level, which is about $17,000 a year in income, then you can get a silver plan for about $20 premium a month, and 95% of your out-of-pocket is covered. That's the subsidies they talk about. But for somebody at $40,000 a year, they're going to pay full boat. And then it gets really, really expensive. But truly, the ACA has to be reformed, and it's a federal program. It's not something that we get to mess with in the state. So actually on December 15th, I'm going to Washington, D.C. to meet with a group that is going to look at healthcare reform and what we can do to reform the ACA and see if we can't do some things that will fix that. It's just an advisory group. We don't have any say in it. We just get to give our opinions. So I can remember years ago where I could do business with 100 companies on health insurance in this part of the state. Today, there are 2 fully insured companies, and that's it: Blue Cross and United Healthcare. In the Kansas City region, Wyandotte, Johnson County, there's 4 fully insured companies, and that's it. Used to be hundreds up there. So we don't have competition. And the ACA is not insurance. So if you call it insurance, insurance is a very specific science. You have to understand the risk. You appropriately rate the risk, and then you price the risk. There is no understanding the risk anymore. You know what the one question they ask you? Actually 2. How old are you and what's your gender? They no longer get to ask what your health conditions are, and that's the only way they can actually know what the risk is. So it's not insurance. So if you call it insurance, you're wrong. It's not insurance. It's a government mandated health plan, but not health insurance.
This has to do with the school finance formula. What commitment can you make to ensure that a redesigned school finance formula won't disadvantage rural conservative districts whose fixed costs and students' needs don't shrink just because the enrollment drops?
That's actually kind of a fun question, because we went through, I don't know if anybody remembers, a period of block grants, right? We had shifted off of the formula, and you'd have thought we were carrying guns into schools or something, right? I mean, people were angry, and I mean, it was just, but that was going towards that. But we got fought by the teachers union, Association of School Boards, Association of Superintendents. Block grants were terrible until they weren't. Right? They want this formula back. It is the formula that we have that is telling you as these schools shrink, they get less money. And so we have to, that's why I think I've been against this formula since I came into the legislature. Because at some point you get things, there's these things about equalization based on value per pupil. There were times when the oil prices were high, you had Western Kansas trucking poverty aid to Blue Valley and Shawnee Mission because of the formula. So it's a mess. We have to get a hold of, we have to do for education. There has to be, it's a third rail that we have to start talking about. And we have to start talking about it, and it's difficult in Kansas because we had a strong tradition of high quality public schools. I think when I graduated, Kansas was in the top 5 of outcomes, and I'm talking outcomes. When I say, I mean outcomes. I mean the ACT scores, and I mean just it's the outcomes, the assessment tests. We're now below the national average. Mississippi's passed us. Our outcomes are the last assessments that I saw. Reading, 72% of our 4th graders below proficiency in reading. That goes to 75% in 8th grade. 60% below proficiency in math, 4th grade, goes to 70, I can't remember, 2 or 4% in the 8th grade. We're cheating those kids. And it's the system, it's not the teacher. I mean, we have some really good teachers, but we have parents and kids that don't have choices. So there's layers of that. We have to have educational choice for our parents. And when I say choice from a government perspective, I'm talking low income, because rich people have choices. You can tutor, you can go to a private school, but there needs to be choices. Next to me in Sedgwick County, you got, well, half of my district's in Wichita. You literally have kids that are trapped in a zip code. Their only choice is a school that's not performing. And so those people need choice. It is a disservice. It's also being proven across the country. 22 states now in the union have some version of universal school choice. And the argument's been, if you give parents choices, you'll destroy public schools. That is being proven false. And by the way, we will always have to support our public schools in a way that focuses on outcomes, because that's the way the most of the kids will be educated. So it can't be ignored. It has to be, but there are things we can do. I don't care if it's get the cell phones out of the classroom. I'm for having the teacher being the highest paid person in the building. Because that's who's producing your product. They get that actually in higher education. Highest paid person in Wichita State, where I work, is not the president of the university. It's the head of the research wing that brings in all this and produces the revenues for that institution. You take that down to the K-12 layer, it is the teachers, a good teacher, and they don't have to be protected by a union even, by the way. A good teacher's worth their weight in gold and everybody knows it. That person should be the highest paid person in the building. But you can't have that conversation with this system. The system we have right now is bent against. As a matter of fact, it incentivizes that good teacher to become an administrator so they can make a little more money and have a little better retirement. It's a perverse incentive. And we can't even talk about it. But those are things you can do outside of even getting to the formula. And it is messed up. We got at-risk funding that gets spent on prom decorations. And we have to fix it. And so it's a multi-pronged approach. Parents need choices, our public schools need funding, our teachers need paid better, and get the cell phone out of the classroom.
If you get a chance to read a book called Anxious Generation, it will show you more information about why cell phones have destroyed our K through 12 education. Matter of fact, cell phones, the smartphone came into existence in around 2012. And since that date, since it came, you can just see the metrics go south. Literally year after year, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And the school districts in the states who have said, we're going to ban cell phones bell to bell, morning bell to evening bell or afternoon bell, those states are seeing their outcomes go up. So it's not about money. You know, people always equate our K through 12 education to dollars. And we've proven that that's not the case, because our outcomes continue to go down. And we pour more and more money. In the last 4 years, how much money, new money, have we poured into K through 12 education?
Oh, just in the last 2, it's over 400 million, just without any outcome regards of that. Just in the last 2, you go 3, I mean, you're 700.
So it's truly not about the money. There's other issues out there, and that cell phone is one of the bad ones. So.
Just a couple of questions, and we'll let you guys go. I know you're probably on the clock already. So. Is there anything in the works to protect the citizens of Kansas from the spread of Sharia law and Islamization? Apparently there were some threatening statements coming from the Islamic Center in Olathe over the last couple of weeks.
I don't think there's anything coming, but I don't, at this point, I mean, it's the law, Sharia has no force here. There'd have to be something coming to allow for it, and I don't know of anything along those lines. As a matter of fact, you would have an immediate response from the legislature, even if you had a local government decide they were going to allow for that. We had, matter of fact, it was a battle I had my first session in the Senate. We have a law that says, basically, American laws for American courts. That was the title of the act, and it explicitly prohibits Sharia law or anything that's not American-based Kansas statute, federal law, has any bearing inside a Kansas court.
I'll finish with this. This kind of comes full circle right here, so you can finish this however you want. Why redistrict? If Republican policies are that good, you should be able to win without gerrymandering.
It's a good question, so I'll take it. So, and for the record, as we go, people right here, I love the gerrymandering term, right? So here's what I'll tell you. There has never been a district drawn on any map in any area at any time that wasn't drawn for political purposes. It's a political process, and that's what we do. The district that every one of your representatives and all of us serve in were drawn for political purposes. That didn't start with Texas this year or California, which, by the way, I actually agree with our governor. She's saying California should redistrict and it's risk too high to do nothing. I agree with her. It's too high to do nothing. We should do it. It is the fact that here's the deal. It didn't start, not only not start with Texas, it didn't start with Eldridge Gerry, who was the governor of Massachusetts, where gerrymandering comes from, in 1812, more than 200 years ago. It started with the founding of the country. It is not immoral, it's not unethical, it is a political process. And I would like to see us gravitate the other way, which is the way we're trying to go, where you have more even districts, where you have the open debate. What happens inside politics, and this is what you see, especially Illinois, California, you draw little pockets of deep red and you draw pockets of deep blue so nobody has to fight for an election. I think all 4 of the congressional districts in Kansas should generally look like Kansas. And here I'll give you my evidence. Kansas, if you call it a district, it's elected a Democrat governor. It's elected Republican senators. It's gone back and forth in governor a lot. Why shouldn't every district look like Kansas? Instead of what we kind of do where you got big one that can win it laying in a casket. Right? And he's like, you don't have to work, you don't have to refine your ideas. Same thing happens in 3. Right? Because that's just the lay of the land. They should all basically represent that. Allows for vibrant debate. It makes you have to explain yourself. And when we do explain ourselves, we do win.
Gosh, I don't have anything to add to that.
Thank you for having us. I appreciate your time. Thank you all for having me.